If you have not been able to prosper, maybe the real obstacle in your life is not in front of you. In many cases, what is still holding everything back is behind you. In the past, in a wound that should no longer rule you, but still shapes your mind, your choices, and the direction of your life. Many people think they have left yesterday behind, simply because time has passed. But time alone does not heal a mind that still reacts to what it suffered. The body kept moving. The days kept passing, life changed. On the outside, and yet on the inside, one part of you is still standing in the place where everything fell apart. That is why so many people want to grow, but cannot sustain growth. They want peace, but keep feeding what hurts them. They want to prosper, but still consult the old pain before making decisions. And while this is happening, the future keeps waiting. There is a hard truth here. The past may explain many things. It may explain your fears. It may explain your insecurities. It may explain why you shut down. What it cannot do is keep controlling your life. There comes a moment when pain is no longer just a memory. It becomes a prison. At that point, the person is no longer simply remembering what happened. They begin obeying what happened. They start acting out of fear. They start expecting the worst. They start limiting themselves because of what happened before. And little by little, they accept a smaller life than the one they were meant to live. Prosperity is not born in a mind bowed down to the past. Prosperity requires presence. It requires vision. It requires the courage to release what hurt you. It requires the strength to stop living as a victim. It requires the decision to live in the present and build the future. That is the point many people miss. Moving on physically does not mean you have moved on emotionally. There are people who left toxic environments, but still carry the words they heard. There are people who ended relationships, but still live with the voice of the person who diminished them echoing inside their mind. There are people whose outer life changed, but who are still trapped in the identity pain created inside them, and that is one of the most dangerous blocks to prosperity, because a mind trapped in the past cannot fully occupy the present. And anyone who cannot fully occupy the present will never build a truly new future. The past does not need to happen again in order to keep dominating someone. It only needs to keep its authority over the way that person thinks, feels, chooses, and acts. That is how an old wound keeps producing present-day results. Sometimes, a person wants to trust, but already expects betrayal. They want to try again, but already imagine failure. They want to build something greater, but sabotage themselves before they even begin. They dream of a better life, but deep down they still believe nothing will ever truly work out. At that stage, the problem is no longer only what happened. The problem becomes the space it still occupies in the mind. When pain continues shaping the way a person sees themselves, pain stops being a memory. It becomes an invisible system of limitation without realizing it. That person begins living around what they suffered. Their choices grow smaller. Their dreams lose strength. Their courage weakens. Their energy drops. Their vision of the future begins to fade. None of that happens because they lack value or potential. It happens because no one builds a great life while still kneeling emotionally before an old story. There is an important difference between explanation and permission. The past may explain part of what you feel, but it cannot keep giving permission to your paralysis. Blaming what happened may feel protective at first, but after a while, it only extends the prison. Maybe you truly were hurt. Maybe you truly were humiliated. Maybe your trust really was betrayed. Maybe deep scars really were left behind. None of that needs to be denied. The pain was real. The injustice may have been real. The emotional impact may have been deep, but continuing to live inside that prison also becomes a choice. When a person refuses to rise inwardly, that is hard to hear. But it is also liberating, because the moment you realize the past is still governing parts of your mind, is the moment you also become aware that something has to break, not someday, not when life gets easier, not when the motivation finally shows up. The break begins when you understand that staying like this is costing you too much. It costs peace. It costs energy. It costs identity. It costs clarity. It costs prosperity. Many people do not realize they are trapped because this prison has no visible bars. It is silent, internal, emotional, mental. On the outside, the person works, talks, smiles, and tries to keep life moving. But inside, something remains frozen. One part of the mind never moved forward. One part of the identity stayed locked in the moment of pain. One part of the soul still reacts as if it were standing inside the wound. That is why so many people cannot understand why they still cannot prosper, even though they genuinely want a different life. There are plans, there are ideas, there is even a desire to start again. But when the time comes to act with conviction, something pulls them back. It does not always come as a clear memory. Very often it shows up as fear, without a name, as constant insecurity, as self-sabotage, as sudden discouragement, as the feeling that nothing will really work over time. All of this starts to feel normal. The person gets used to living below their potential, gets used to expecting less, gets used to thinking small, gets used to not trusting, gets used to doubting themselves before they even begin. Without realizing it, they start building life around defense mechanisms. They no longer choose from freedom, they choose in order to avoid being hurt again. They no longer dream boldly. They dream within the limits of fear. They no longer act from conviction. They act to control risk, avoid rejection, and prevent more disappointment. That is how emotional imprisonment works. It does not stop someone from living. It stops someone from living fully. The outer structure of life may still remain standing, but the inner strength needed to grow, build trust, take a stand, and prosper is slowly being eroded. Instead of looking inward, many people keep searching outside for the cause of everything they think about the money that has not arrived, the opportunity that has not appeared, the help no one offered, the environment that did not cooperate. But many times the greatest resistance is not outside, it is inside. It is in the difficulty of believing things can be different now. It is in the habit of interpreting the present through the lens of old wounds. It is in the inability to detach emotionally from the former version of yourself. When someone views life through pain, even opportunity feels threatening. Love feels risky. Growth feels dangerous. Even happiness seems too fragile to trust. The mind becomes defensive, always bracing for the next disappointment, but a mind occupied with defending itself will rarely enter a state of building. And prosperity requires building. It requires clean energy. It requires vision. It requires faith. It requires presence. It requires the courage to sustain new decisions without constantly consulting old fears. Anyone who lives emotionally chained to the past eventually slips into survival mode, and a person living only to survive thinks about what might go wrong, never about what might flourish. In that condition, they are not creating, they are simply trying not to fall apart. There is a major difference between living and merely protecting yourself, between moving forward and merely staying guarded, between building the future and merely managing old trauma. That is why so many people are exhausted, not because they are doing too much, but because they are spending their strength trying to defend themselves from emotional ghosts carried over from the past that drains enthusiasm. It steals clarity, it weakens vision, it dims hope. Without even noticing it, the person becomes a spectator in their own life. They watch the days go by, they watch opportunities pass, they watch others move ahead. They watch the years change, and somewhere inside, there is still a part of them waiting for a repair that may never come. A delayed acknowledgement, an explanation, a perfect emotional resolution. As long as the mind is waiting for the past to fix what it broke, the present keeps being wasted. Prospering requires letting go of the expectation that life will return exactly what was taken. Sometimes the real turning point begins when a person understands they can no longer tie their future to something that is already over. There will not always be an apology. There will not always be acknowledgement. There will not always be perfect closure. But life still has to go on. The mind still has to realign. The future still has to be built. Then an even deeper point appears. Pain stops being just memory and begins mixing with identity. That is a dangerous stage, because one thing is to have been wounded, something very different is to begin defining yourself by the wound. Instead of thinking I was rejected, the person starts believing I was made to be rejected. Instead of recognizing they suffered loss, they begin to feel loss is part of who they are. Instead of understanding they were humiliated, they start living as though they have no worth. When that happens, everything changes. The way they think changes, their posture changes, their expectations change, their reading of life changes. Everything starts passing through the filter of pain. When someone gets close, mistrust appears. When an opportunity arises, hesitation appears. If something good begins to grow, the mind already imagines the moment it will all collapse. At that point, the past is no longer just being remembered. It is being consulted, as if it still has the authority to decide who that person is, what they deserve, and how far they are allowed to go. That destroys self-image, and no one builds a bigger life than the image they carry of themselves. If deep down, a person sees themselves as incapable, unworthy, marked, delayed, or doomed to repeat old pain, they will have great difficulty sustaining choices that are aligned with prosperity. They will settle for too little. They will tolerate what should never be tolerated. They will postpone what needed to begin. They will quit before ever trying with real conviction, not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack potential, but because identity has been contaminated by experiences that should have been processed, not turned into definition. That is why one of the most important tasks of inner reconstruction is to separate experience from identity. You may have lived through painful things without becoming what you lived through. You may have experienced rejection. Without becoming rejection, you may have faced humiliation. Without becoming humiliation, you may have been betrayed. Without becoming someone condemned to live forever in distrust and emotional scarcity. Prosperity begins to emerge when that separation becomes clear. This is also where a subtle trap appears. Victimhood. Acknowledging pain is not victimhood. Admitting that you were hurt, betrayed, humiliated, or treated unjustly is simply honesty. The problem begins when pain stops being something acknowledged and becomes a permanent home. The person keeps seeing themselves only through what was done to them. They interpret everything through the lens of injustice. They build their personal narrative around the past. They use the wound to explain every present limitation. Without noticing it, they keep handing power to whatever hurt them. That is the silent consequence of a victim mentality. It transfers power when someone believes they cannot move forward because others ruined them. They may be sincere in what they feel, but they are also allowing the past and the people who hurt them to keep ruling the present. In practice, it is as if the abuser, the manipulator, the betrayer, or the old circumstance still has daily access to that person's mind. As long as someone keeps defining themselves by the wound, they will keep obeying the damage emotionally. Victimhood feels protective. It feels like a way to honor the pain. It feels like a way not to minimize what happened. But walking away from victimhood does not mean denying evil. It means refusing to keep bowing to it. One thing is to say, "This hurt me deeply." Something entirely different is to decide without realizing it, that because of this, I will never be whole again. That second posture is what destroys inner strength. Prosperity requires a person to stop living only in reaction to the past and start taking responsibility for their own rebuilding. Not responsibility for the blame of what happened, but responsibility for the decision of what will be done with it. From this point forward, you are not to blame for everything you lived through, but you are still responsible for not allowing it to govern the rest of your life. As long as the mind remains occupied revisiting pain, the future will remain without direction. That is one of the quietest losses in the life of someone trapped in the past. The person thinks they are just remembering, just trying to understand, just processing. In reality, they are spending emotional, mental, and spiritual energy on something that can no longer be changed. Every ounce of energy poured excessively into yesterday's energy that is no longer available for what can still be built. That may be why so many people live exhausted. They carry unfinished stories, unresolved conversations, untreated resentment, frustrations that still make noise inside the mind. All of that takes up space. It steals focus. It interferes with clarity. It disorganizes priorities. It weakens direction. Without realizing it, the person begins postponing their own life. They want to grow but are still emotionally negotiating with old memories. They want to prosper but keep returning to the same inner scene where they were wounded. They want peace but keep feeding thoughts that reopen the same pain. That is how the future ends up ownerless. The future begins to be built only when someone takes hold of the present with intention. If the mind remains turned backward, there will never be enough vision looking forward. No one plans powerfully when they are emotionally consumed by memories that drain their energy. No one sustains new habits consistently when part of them is still trapped in old chapters. No one expands their life with courage while staying inwardly tied to whatever keeps explaining why everything went wrong. Every time you spend more time reliving than building, the past steals from the future the space that should belong to it. Prosperity does not grow in a mind disordered by resentment, guilt, anger, self-pity, and emotional repetition. Prosperity requires presence and direction. It requires the energy of the soul to remain available for building, for discipline, for planning, for vision, for repositioning. There is another truth. Many people resist accepting not everything that hurt you deserves to keep occupying space in your mind. People pass, seasons pass, environments pass, cycles end. And yet for many people, what ended outwardly continues living inwardly. The person who caused the pain is no longer physically there but still occupies emotional territory. The humiliation happened once but is replayed countless times. In memory, old words keep echoing, old contempt keeps influencing. Old disappointments keep dictating emotional reactions and inner limits. But prosperity requires room. A mind packed with old weight cannot sustain expansion. An emotional life filled with open wounds will not produce lightness, clarity, or vision. Many times prosperity does not begin when something new enters. It begins when something old finally leaves the mind, leaves the emotional center, leaves the place of influence that includes memories, attachments, guilt, and even former versions of yourself. Not everything that belonged to your history deserves to keep participating in your future, and in many cases, leaving the past behind also means leaving certain people behind. Pain does not always come only from events. Very often it comes through relationships, through people who diminished you, who manipulated you, who humiliated you, who betrayed you, who controlled you, who tried to shape your identity through lack and limitation. Even when the relationship ends, the effect may remain. The person walks away from the relationship, but carries the mentality formed inside it. They leave the environment, but still here. Internally, the voice that reduced them, they leave the setting, but continue behaving like someone small, limited, or without worth. That is why leaving people behind is not always only a physical move. Often, it is a mental and spiritual one. It is deciding that old voice no longer has authority. It is refusing to keep living in search of approval that never came and may never come. Not every bond deserves to be preserved. Not every form of staying is a virtue. Not every loyalty is healthy. There are ties that drain energy, corrode identity, and sabotage prosperity. There are relationships that prevent repositioning because they require the person to remain the fragile version of themselves. They always were. In that context, prospering also means discerning that it means understanding that peace is not compatible with ties that feed chaos. In some cases, separation is not coldness, it is inner survival, it is protection of identity. It is respect for the future you want to build. In the middle of this process, one word inevitably appears: forgiveness. And perhaps that is one of the most misunderstood concepts when the subject is inner freedom. Many people resist forgiveness because they associate it with agreement, approval, weakness, forced forgetting, passivity in the face of injustice. But forgiveness is none of those things. Forgiveness does not mean saying everything was fine. It does not mean minimizing evil. It does not mean restoring access to someone who did not know how to care for you. Forgiveness means stopping the bleeding from the same wound every single day. It means refusing to let someone else's wrong continue poisoning you from the inside. It means interrupting the cycle in which the offense happened once, but keeps being reenacted in the mind indefinitely when someone refuses to forgive. They often believe they are punishing the one who hurt them, but in practice they keep their own soul chained to the episode. The memory remains active. The emotion reignites peace, is interrupted, the mind loses strength, the past stays alive. That is why forgiveness is not a gift to the person who hurt you. It is liberation for the person who wants to keep moving without invisible chains. It does not erase boundaries, it does not remove discernment, it does not require automatic reconciliation, but it does free the mind from the obligation to keep circling around the pain, and no one truly prospers while feeding an inner fire of resentment. Every day there is still another essential point. Accepting the present is not the same as settling for it. Many people fight their current reality in a way that only increases their suffering. They look at their life and feel resentment. They look at where they are and feel shame. They see the present situation and want to deny, reject, or escape it, but real transformation begins with lucidity. No one changes what they refuse to look at. No one heals what they insist on denying. No one rebuilds life on the fantasy that everything should already have been resolved. Accepting the present means recognizing honestly where you are right now. It means saying, "This is my reality today. These are my challenges today. These are my limitations today. These are the consequences of my choices or of the pain I am still carrying." And from there, choosing to act. Acceptance is not passivity, it is clarity. It is stopping the waste of energy spent fighting facts and starting to use that energy to transform them. The present may not be ideal. It may be disordered, it may still carry the marks of the past, it may reveal painful consequences. Even so, it remains the only point from which change can begin. That is exactly why the present becomes so powerful. The past has already happened. The future has not arrived yet, but the present is the only place where real decisions can be made. It is in the present that the mind can be repositioned. It is in the present that patterns can be interrupted. It is in the present that new habits are born. It is in the present that a person decides what they will feed and what they must cut off. Many people speak of the future as if it were some distant place that will simply appear one day. But the future is planted in the choices of the present. Anyone who continues living emotionally in the past loses access to one of the greatest assets of life, the ability to act today, because the present requires presence, it requires awareness, it requires responsibility. Anyone who spends all their time being pulled backward by memories, guilt, resentment, and pain cannot inhabit the now with their full strength. They are physically in today, but mentally still subject to yesterday. Prosperity requires a return to the present. It requires reconnecting with your own ability to act, to choose to break old patterns, to plant, to plan, to sustain a new posture. But freedom from the past alone is not enough. Vision for the future is also necessary. That is where many people make a mistake. They understand they need to leave pain behind, but they do not fill the mind with a new destination. They empty themselves of the prison, but do not fill themselves with direction, and a mind without direction tends to drift back toward whatever occupied the most space for the longest time. If the past was the emotional center of life, it will keep trying to return whenever the future remains blurred. That is why planning the future is not merely organization, it is healing, it is rebuilding, it is an act of power. When they begin to name what they want to build, they leave the field of reaction and enter the field of creation. The mind stops being only an archive of pain and begins becoming a place of vision. That is precisely where prosperity begins to emerge. Planning the future is also an act of faith. It requires believing the story is not over. It requires believing there is life after pain, rebuilding after loss, identity after humiliation, abundance after emotional scarcity. Many people do not plan because deep down they have lost that faith. Pain stole expectation, it stole enthusiasm. It stole the ability to imagine something genuinely good, so they begin living only to manage the present, to survive, to put out fires, to keep standing. But prosperity requires more than survival. It requires direction. A clear goal repositions the mind. A clear purpose organizes energy. A clear vision interrupts the cycle of emotional repetition. When you know where you want to go, it becomes easier to recognize what needs to be left behind. When there is a strong image of the future, the past loses part of its magnetism. When the mind receives a new mission, it no longer has so much time to remain in service to old pain. There is another decisive point. In this journey, your new life does not begin when everything around you changes. It begins when your mind stops consulting old pain in order to make new decisions. Many people already want something new, but continue deciding from old criteria. They want to love, but consult past betrayal. They want to grow, but consult earlier failure. They want to show up, but consult the humiliation they lived through. They want to try again, but consult the rejection they are still carrying. So, even when the external scene changes, the inner command remains old. And when the inner command stays old, the results tend to repeat old limitations. Prospering requires a deeper shift. You must begin making decisions from the identity you want to build, not from the wound you still feel. You must ask the trauma less and ask purpose more. Consult fear less and vision more. Look less at the memory of the fall and more at the awareness of what can still be raised. That is why forgetting the past does not mean losing your memory. It means removing its authority. It means remembering without obeying, recalling without bowing, acknowledging what happened without allowing it to keep defining expectations, limits, and decisions. Leaving the past behind does not dishonor your story. It matures your relationship with what happened. It means understanding that memory can remain without continuing to rule, that the scar can remain without staying open, that the story can be remembered without occupying the center of your life. That is freedom. Freedom is not the absence of a past, it is the absence of submission to it. From this point on, the law of prosperity behind all of this becomes clear. What belongs behind you must remain behind you. That sounds simple, but almost no one truly lives it. Many people carry yesterday into every decision of today. They bring bitterness into new relationships. They carry insecurity into opportunity. They drag feelings of failure into new beginnings. They push fear into their dreams, and then they repeat their story without realizing it. Not because the past has absolute power, but because it was kept alive, fed, consulted, and replayed. The law is simple because it always works. Whatever you continue feeding will continue influencing you. If you feed vision, the mind expands. If you feed purpose, energy becomes organized. If you feed discipline, the future takes shape. But if you feed bitterness, guilt, self-pity, and resentment, the mind remains trapped even while life tries to move forward. Prosperity is incompatible with voluntary residence. Inside emotional chains, leaving the past behind is therefore a daily decision. It is not one dramatic moment. It is not a beautiful phrase. It is not a single emotional experience. It is practice. It is vigilance over your thoughts. It is attention to the narratives running inside you. It is the ability to notice when the mind is returning to the old place and interrupt that movement. Some days will feel lighter, other days will require greater firmness. At times, the memory will come back with force. At other times, the pain will try to reactivate. Sometimes the old identity will call you back. That is exactly when the new posture must be held. You do not need to deny what you feel, but you also do not need to turn every feeling into a command. You can acknowledge emotion without making a home inside it. You can recognize the memory without handing your life back to it. You can walk through hard days without breaking your decision to move forward. That is how freedom becomes strong. Not through momentary intensity, but through consistency. And perhaps true freedom begins right there. The moment you stop giving the past the right to define who you are. That is one of the most powerful acts a person can live out. Your life may indeed have been marked by real pain, by deep loss, by injustice that left scars, by people who tried to dim your light, by environments that weakened your identity. But none of that has to keep governing what you do next. There comes an hour when the soul has to rise. It has to say, what happened was real, but it will not be sovereign. The pain existed, but it will not remain the source of identity. The past may have explained chapters of the story, but it will not write the next ones. That is the spirit of prosperity. To prosper is not merely to have more, it is to become free within. It is to recover authority over your own mind. It is to inhabit the present with strength. It is to look toward the future with vision. It is to stop using pain as a home, and at most turn it into the memory of something you overcame. Perhaps one of the hardest laws of prosperity is this: you cannot build a powerful life while continuing to live emotionally in a place that is already over. The past may have marked you. It may have delayed you. It may have wounded deep areas of your mind and identity, but it cannot continue serving as the excuse that governs your present and blocks your future. There comes a moment when a decision has to be made. Either you keep consulting old pain and repeating the same prison, or you choose to live in the present, take responsibility for your rebuilding, and begin planning a future greater than anything that tried to destroy you. That decision does not erase the story, but it changes its direction. The person who prospers is not the one who was never wounded. It is the one who refused to remain defined by the wound. It is the one who understood that victimhood extends bondage, that forgiveness frees the mind, that accepting the present brings clarity, that planning the future reignites power, that leaving the past behind is not weakness, it is maturity, it is courage, it is spiritual strength, it is emotional intelligence, it is a decision. If this message spoke to you, share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want more content about mental prosperity, inner strength, purpose, and rebuilding your life, subscribe to Prosperity Laws. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next videos, and write this sentence in the comments: my past will not rule my future. That may be the decision that starts changing your life today.